she froze in place. On the other side of the glass, just inches away, two small brown eyes blinked back at her. The bear cub wasn't snarling. It wasn't breaking in. It was simply peeking. And in that moment, the whole village gathered to see what the little visitor wanted. The last of the evening sun had dipped behind the forested ridges when Anna locked the library's side door and returned to her desk. The library wasn't much, just two long rooms lined with shelves of well-thumbed books, its stone walls holding the cool of autumn nights, its windows framed with heavy oak. Few came at this hour, the schoolchildren had already gone home, and the village adults preferred their hearths and suppers over reading after dusk. Anna, however, cherished these quiet evenings. They gave her space to sort new donations and shelve forgotten returns. Tonight, a pile of geography books sat waiting on her cart. She hummed softly as she lifted one, its cover cracked from years of small hands flipping maps of mountains and rivers. That's when she heard it tap, tap, tap. She froze. The sound was subtle but distinct, a rhythm against glass. At first, she thought it might be a tree branch swaying in the evening breeze, brushing against the tall windows. She set the book aside and looked toward the eastern wall, where the glow of a single oil lamp pooled across shelves. The tapping came again, louder this time. Her eyes darted to the far window. And that's when she saw it. Two dark, round eyes stared directly at her. Anna's breath caught. For a split second she thought a child had pressed against the window from outside. But then the shape moved, rising slightly, a soft shadow outlined by the glow within the library. A snout fogged the glass, leaving a smear of condensation. And behind the nose, fur. Thick, soft brown fur. A bear cub. The cub was small but sturdy, standing upright on its hind legs, front paws braced against the glass. Its claws tapped lightly as it shifted, peering curiously into the room. Anna's stomach clenched, fear prickling through her. A cub meant a mother nearby. Where was she? For a long heartbeat, librarian and cub locked eyes. Anna expected aggression, perhaps pawing at the window, a growl. Instead, the cub only tilted its head, ears twitching, as though studying her the way children studied illustrations in a book. Anna whispered under her breath, as though afraid her voice might shatter the moment. "Oh, what are you doing here, little one?" Her hands trembled slightly. She wanted to back away, to find the phone in the back office, to alert the forest ranger who sometimes passed through the village. Yet her legs rooted to the floor. She couldn't move. The cub blinked. Its breath fogged another patch of glass, forming a clouded oval that distorted its tiny face. Then, tap. One paw lifted, tapping lightly again, like a child knocking politely to be let in. Anna's heart pounded. She wasn't dealing with a stuffed toy or a storybook bear. This was a wild animal, and any misstep could mean danger. Yet there was something disarming about the cub's innocence. It wasn't searching for food scraps in trash bins like some bears did when they wandered too close to town. It wasn't snarling. It was simply curious. The silence stretched. Then, faintly, Anna heard footsteps outside, approaching from the narrow cobbled street. She stiffened, her eyes flicking to the darkened window pane beside the cub. A figure's shadow lengthened in the lamplight, growing closer with each step. It must be one of the villagers heading home. Perhaps Tomas, the carpenter, whose shop sat across the square. Or Mrs. Erna, who often stopped by to return books late. Whoever it was, they were about to see what Anna saw. Her breath quickened. If they panicked, if they shouted, it might startle the cub, or worse, draw its mother closer. The cub's ears twitched at the sound, swiveling toward the street. It didn't run. Instead, it pressed its face even closer to the window, as though eager to stay hidden within this strange glow, this little world of books and lamplight. Anna's pulse thudded in her ears. She had to decide, should she wave frantically to warn the approaching villager? Or stay frozen and hope the cub slipped away before anyone noticed? The footsteps grew louder, firm against stone. Whoever it was, they were only a few yards away now. Anna's hands gripped the edge of the desk. Her lips parted, ready to call out. And then the door latch rattled. Someone was entering the library. Anna realizes the cub is still at the window when the library door begins to open. She doesn't know who's coming in, or what they'll do when they see the bear. The library window rattled faintly as the cub pressed its paws harder against the glass. The sound was so soft that most people inside didn't notice it at first. Only a boy sitting near the window with a picture book in his lap turned his head. His eyes widened, and the book slid silently from his hands to the floor. For a few seconds, the cub and the boy just stared at each other. The cub's round, dark eyes blinked slowly, and the boy's mouth parted, caught between awe and fear. The boy thought about calling out, but something in the cub's posture, gentle, almost playful, made him stay quiet. It was not baring teeth, not growling. It just seemed curious. Then came the scrape of a chair. The librarian, an older woman with glasses hanging from a chain around her neck, walked past the window with a stack of books. She didn't notice the cub right away. But when she turned her head to adjust the curtains, she froze. Her lips parted as if she had stumbled upon something that belonged in a storybook rather than her library. Outside, the cub shifted its weight. It tilted its head, sniffed at the glass, and then pawed the bottom edge of the window as if searching for a way inside. Its claws made a delicate tapping sound against the wood frame. The librarian gasped softly. The sound was enough to stir whispers from others seated in the quiet room. "Is that?" someone muttered. "Shoo," the librarian whispered, raising a hand for silence. She didn't want to scare the animal. The cub's ears flicked toward the voices, and for a moment it sat back on its haunches, looking almost as though it was listening to the hum of life within the library. Meanwhile, outside on the cobblestone street, the faint silhouette that had been approaching grew clearer. A farmer returning from the edge of the forest noticed the small figure pressed against the library window. He stopped in his tracks, gripping his walking stick tighter. A bear cub alone in the village was unusual, worrying even. Where was its mother? No cub wandered so far without her close behind. He didn't call out. Instead, he began to back away slowly, intending to warn others. His boots made a crunch against loose gravel, and though he moved carefully, the sound carried. The cub's ears swiveled sharply, and its head turned toward the farmer. Its nose twitched, picking up the scent of the outside world, the smells of fields and animals clinging to the man's clothes. The cub hesitated, torn between the glowing warmth inside the library and the movement in the shadows outside. Its claws scraped the window again, but this time the sound was sharper, more insistent. People inside shifted nervously in their seats. What if the cub tried harder to get in? The boy who had seen it first pressed his hands against the glass from the inside. For one surreal moment, paw and palm met with only a thin barrier between. The cub snuffled at the glass, leaving a wet circle where its nose pressed. The boy smiled, but the adults were less enchanted. "This is dangerous," whispered the librarian. "It could mean the mother is nearby." Her words dropped like stones into the quiet room. The thought of a mother bear somewhere close to the edge of the village sent a shiver through everyone. A cub was one thing, curious, clumsy, even sweet. But a protective mother bear was something else entirely. The cub, still fascinated, made a small sound. A soft, high-pitched bleat, almost like a call. Several people inside the library stiffened. The farmer outside froze as well, eyes darting toward the tree line beyond the street. The air seemed to hold its breath. Then, from far off, there was a rustle. Faint but distinct. The unmistakable sound of something heavy moving through undergrowth. The boy's heart pounded, and even the cub seemed to pause, its ears pricked, listening intently. For a long moment, silence returned. But everyone knew what that sound had meant. The mother was close. The librarian turned her gaze toward the door, her lips trembling as she whispered to those near her, "No sudden movements. Stay calm." The boy, still pressed against the glass, looked out with wide eyes. He didn't understand why the others seemed so afraid. To him, the cub wasn't frightening, it was a visitor, a creature curious about their world. But when the farmer outside took another slow step backward, his eyes scanning the tree line, the truth sank in. The cub was not alone. And if its mother appeared in the middle of the village, things could change very quickly. The faint rustle in the forest grew louder, and shadows shifted just beyond the cobblestone street. Everyone inside the library braced, waiting to see if a massive shape would emerge. The murmur of whispers inside the library faded into silence as everyone strained to listen. Outside, the cub pressed its nose harder against the glass, almost pawing at the boy's hand on the other side. But the rustling in the tree line grew louder, and the weight of that sound carried a warning that none of them could ignore. The librarian's heart pounded. She leaned toward the boy and whispered, "Step back." Slowly. Her voice was firm, though it trembled with urgency. The boy hesitated, unwilling to move away from this unusual encounter, but the look in her eyes convinced him. He pulled his hand back, and instantly the cub seemed to notice. Its paw slid down the window, leaving streaks on the glass as it dropped to all fours. The cub turned its head toward the sound of the rustling. Its ears perked up, its little body tensing. It made a soft chuffing noise, then another. The sound echoed faintly down the cobblestone street. Somewhere in the shadows, a low, guttural huff answered. The farmer standing outside gripped his stick tighter, his throat dry. He took another slow step backward, careful not to turn his back on the darkening tree line. Inside the library, every pair of eyes was locked on the window. A woman clutched her daughter's shoulder. A man slowly closed the heavy history book in his hands, as if reducing any sound that could carry. Even the air felt heavy. The smell of old paper and polished wood mixed with something else, fear. Then it came. Out of the brush, a massive shadow emerged. The mother bear stepped onto the edge of the street, her thick fur catching the last of the evening light. Her head swung left, then right, eyes narrowing as she took in the strange human settlement before her. And then she saw it, her cub standing on its hind legs at the library window, staring inside. The cub bleated again, this time louder, more insistent. The mother's ears flicked. She began to walk forward, each step measured but deliberate. Her claws clicked faintly against the stone. The sound echoed in the silence, sending a shiver through everyone watching. The boy gasped softly. She was enormous. Much larger than he had imagined a bear could be. The cub seemed so small compared to her. And yet, even from the other side of the glass, he could see the tenderness in the way her head lowered toward the little one. She made a deep sound, part grunt, part sigh, that seemed to rumble in her chest. The cub responded by bouncing lightly on its paws, almost as if relieved. The farmer outside froze where he stood. His breathing grew shallow, and sweat formed at his temples. He knew one wrong move could turn the situation dangerous. If the mother bear felt threatened, her protective instinct would overwhelm everything else. He dared not raise his stick. Instead, he slowly moved his hand toward his pocket, where a small whistle hung from a leather cord. It was used to call for help across the fields. But would using it now scare the bear, or invite trouble? Inside, the librarian whispered, "Don't move. Don't make a sound." Her eyes tracked the mother bear's every step. The massive animal moved closer, finally reaching the base of the window. Her nose lifted, nostrils flaring as she sniffed the glass, the scents of old wood, dust, and the faint aroma of ink mingling with the air that separated her from the humans inside. The cub squealed softly, pressing its nose back to the window as if to show its mother what it had discovered. For a moment, it seemed like an innocent exchange between parent and child. But the mother's gaze shifted. She noticed the faces staring at her through the glass. Her ears flattened slightly, her jaw tightening. She huffed once, the sound booming against the silence. The boy flinched. Even behind the thick glass, the vibration of the sound seemed to carry inside. The librarian's mind raced. What if the bear tried to follow her cub's curiosity and break through? What if she mistook their stillness for a threat? She leaned closer to the nearest adult and whispered, "We need to signal the others. Someone has to guide her back to the forest." But who would dare step outside now? The farmer made his choice. Slowly, he raised the whistle to his lips. The cold metal brushed against them, but he didn't blow yet. His eyes darted to the mother bear, then back to the cub. Timing was everything. If he startled her at the wrong moment, her reaction could be devastating. He had to wait until she was far enough from the cub that it wouldn't feel like she was being separated. The cub pawed the window again, letting out another soft call. This time, the sound was sharper, like a child tugging impatiently at a parent's sleeve. The mother growled low, but it wasn't anger, it was command. The cub paused, lowered itself to the ground, and looked up at her, as though it understood. For a long moment, nothing happened. Just the quiet connection between a cub and its mother, and the silent, breathless humans watching. Then, the mother turned her head again. She looked toward the darkened path back into the forest. Her muscles tightened. She was preparing to leave. Relief washed over the farmer, and even some of the people inside began to exhale slowly. But just as quickly, the cub rose to its hind legs again. This time, instead of pawing at the glass, it pressed harder, leaving streaks as its claws scratched faintly against the surface. The sound echoed inside the quiet library like nails on a chalkboard. The boy instinctively pressed his hand against the glass again, drawn to the cub's insistence. Their palms met through the barrier once more. The mother bear's head snapped back toward the window. She had seen the movement. Her nostrils flared, her body stiffening. She took a step closer, her eyes locking onto the human child inside. Her breath fogged the window. The cub looked between them, uncertain, almost torn. The room inside went still again, fear surging back into every chest. The farmer clenched the whistle in his hand, his pulse pounding. It was now or never. But could he risk it? Or would the sound trigger the very charge he feared most? The mother bear loomed closer to the window, her massive frame filling the glass. The cub pressed its tiny paw against the same spot as the boy's hand. The farmer raised the whistle to his lips and then froze. The whistle trembled in the farmer's hand. He had used it 100 times before in the fields to call his sons or signal a stray dog, but never like this. Never with a massive wild bear just feet away, its heavy breath steaming against the library glass. Inside, the boy's hand remained pressed to the window, matching the cub's paw. The librarian wanted to shout at him, to pull him back, but fear locked her throat. Every muscle in the room was tight, waiting to see what would happen next. The mother bear's head tilted. She was studying the boy, not with confusion anymore but with a penetrating sharpness, as if weighing the intent behind the child's movement. Her ears shifted back. A low rumble started in her chest, deep and warning, vibrating even through the thick pane of glass. The cub squeaked in protest, pawing at the window again, not understanding why its mother had turned tense. The farmer inhaled sharply, raised the whistle, and blew. A piercing sound cut across the silence, high and clear. It echoed down the cobblestone street, bouncing off stone walls and fading into the tree line. The mother bear jerked back, startled. Her massive body turned sharply toward the farmer's direction, shoulders stiff, eyes glowing in the fading light. The cub squealed again and dropped to all fours, confused by the sudden sound. For a split second, the entire scene balanced on the knife's edge of chaos. If the bear charged, there would be no stopping her. The farmer didn't move. He kept the whistle in his mouth, steady, his hands open at his sides. He wasn't a threat, and he knew he had to show it. His legs trembled, but his stance remained firm. Behind the window, villagers pressed deeper into the shadows, praying the glass would hold if things went wrong. The mother bear huffed once, exhaling hard enough to mist the air. She stepped toward the farmer, muscles flexing, eyes fixed. Each step she took echoed in his ears like the pounding of a drum. The cub squeaked again, torn between following her and staying at the window where the boy still stood frozen. The librarian finally snapped into action. She rushed to the boy, gently pulling him back from the glass. "That's enough," she whispered urgently. "She's looking at you." The boy resisted for half a second, his eyes locked on the cub, but the librarian's grip held firm. Slowly, he stepped away, and the cub's paw slid down the glass, leaving faint streaks where it had pressed. The mother bear noticed. Her head swiveled back to the window. The human child was gone. She huffed again, lower this time, and turned her head back toward the forest. She made a sound, short, commanding. The cub hesitated, its ears twitching, then slowly padded back from the glass. The farmer exhaled, lowering the whistle. Relief began to seep into his chest, but it was fragile, unsteady. The bear hadn't left yet. She was standing in the middle of the cobblestone street, her cub circling her legs. The village was silent except for the occasional creak of branches overhead. Everyone watched as she seemed to deliberate, caught between two instincts, to retreat back into the safety of the woods, or to confront what had drawn her cub to this strange place. The cub whimpered, pressing itself against her side. The mother leaned down, nudging it gently with her muzzle. The sound she made this time was softer, almost like a sigh. She shifted her weight, glancing back at the tree line. Step by step, she began to turn. The cub followed reluctantly, glancing over its shoulder at the library window one last time. Inside, the boy pushed against the librarian's hold, desperate to see. His small face peeked out, eyes wide. The cub saw him. Just for a heartbeat, their gazes locked again, one through glass, one through fading light. Then, the cub disappeared into the brush, its mother's shadow swallowing it whole. The library let out a collective breath. Shoulders dropped, hands unclenched, and the librarian finally sank into a chair. The farmer lowered the whistle from his lips, his hands trembling now that the danger had passed. For a moment, it seemed over. But then, from the distance, another sound rose. Not from the mother, not from the cub, but from deeper in the forest. A heavy, resonant roar carried across the village, so deep it rattled the window panes. The farmer froze, his chest tightening. This wasn't the same bear. It was another. Bigger. Closer. The villagers looked at each other, fear reigniting instantly. The mother bear had not been alone. Just as the mother led her cub back into the woods, the air split with the roar of another bear deeper in the forest. Stronger, closer. The question wasn't whether the bears had gone, but whether more were coming. The roar echoed so powerfully it seemed to shake the walls of the library. A low, guttural sound rolled across the village like thunder, carrying weight far beyond the cry of a single bear. This wasn't a warning. It was a claim. The librarian gripped the boy's shoulders tighter. "Stay back," she whispered, her voice quivering. The boy's eyes darted to the dark line of trees, searching for movement. The cub and its mother had already vanished into the brush, but now, every villager feared what might step out next. The farmer swallowed hard, the whistle trembling in his hand. He had known bears all his life, seen them from afar, tracked their movements near the fields, but this roar was different. It wasn't the uncertain cry of a young male wandering too close. It was deeper, heavier, more authoritative. An older bear. A dominant one. The street fell silent again. Lanterns flickered against stone walls, their flames shivering as if reacting to the tension in the air. Everyone waited. The sound of a single twig snapping in the forest carried like a gunshot. Then, from the shadows, a shape emerged. Massive. Heavier and broader than the mother bear, his head low, shoulders rippling with muscle. His coat was darker, almost black in places, catching only slivers of fading light. He moved with certainty, each step deliberate, pressing down on the earth as though testing the ground. The mother bear froze mid-step. She turned back, standing tall, her cub pressed tightly against her legs. The two bears locked eyes, and though no human in the village could understand the silent conversation between them, the meaning was clear. The larger bear wasn't just passing through. He was here for something more. The librarian's heart pounded as she pulled the boy further from the window. The farmer raised the whistle again but hesitated. Would the shrill sound that startled the mother anger this male instead? His lungs refused to draw the breath he needed to blow. The boy squirmed, whispering, "That's not the same one." His words were almost lost under the pounding silence. The larger bear stepped closer, sniffing the ground where the cub had just been. He exhaled through his nose, a loud, sharp snort, before swinging his massive head toward the library window. His dark eyes reflected the lantern light, burning like coals in the half-dark. The mother bear moved then, sudden, deliberate. She stepped between him and the village, blocking his line of sight with her broad frame. Her ears laid back, and for the first time, she released a warning growl of her own. The cub whimpered, pressed flat against the stone wall of a nearby house, its small body trembling. Inside the library, no one dared move. Not even a breath. It felt as though the entire building leaned forward with the weight of fear. The boy pressed against the glass again, his small hand leaving a foggy mark. "She's protecting it," he whispered. The librarian tried to hush him, but his words rang true. The farmer finally raised the whistle to his lips again. The metal pressed cold against his teeth. If he didn't act, the bears might clash, right there in the middle of the village street. And if they did, the glass, the walls, the people, they would all be too close to safety. The mother bear roared suddenly. It wasn't the deep, commanding voice of the larger male, but it was enough to echo through the village, bouncing off walls and rattling lantern glass. Her body surged forward a step, hackles bristling, her teeth bared in sharp defiance. The larger bear stopped. His muscles rippled beneath his dark coat, but he did not lunge. Instead, he shifted his weight, standing taller, testing her resolve. The silence that followed was suffocating, broken only by the cub's small cries and the farmer's shallow breaths. Then, movement. The larger bear turned his head, sniffing once more toward the forest. His ears twitched. Something out there had caught his attention. Another noise? Another presence? Whatever it was, it stole his focus for a moment. The mother seized the chance. She pushed the cub toward the forest edge with her muzzle, urging it to move. The cub hesitated, still glancing back toward the library, but the urgency in her movements left no room for choice. Step by step, she guided her cub into the trees. The larger bear didn't follow immediately. He stood, watching her retreat, his breath heavy and deliberate. The villagers didn't move, not even as the mother disappeared fully into the brush. Only when her shadow was gone did the larger male drop his gaze back to the village. And then he stepped forward. The mother managed to retreat with her cub into the woods, but the massive male turned his full attention toward the village. His heavy steps pressed into the cobblestones, carrying him closer to the library doors. The bear's weight made the cobblestones groan. Each step echoed through the village like a drumbeat, steady and deliberate, as though he owned the night. The sound of claws scraping stone mixed with the faint hiss of lantern flames. Inside the library, no one moved. Not even a whisper. The boy clutched the window frame so tightly his knuckles turned pale. His breath fogged the glass, and in the halo of lamplight outside, the dark giant advanced. The librarian's heart hammered. She wanted to pull the boy back, drag him to the safety of the storage room, but her body refused to move. Her eyes were locked on the bear's massive head as it turned slightly, nostrils flaring, sampling the air. He could smell them. He knew they were there. The farmer stood near the library door, the whistle still gripped between his teeth. His hand trembled at his side, gripping the handle of the old lantern. The flame inside flickered, painting his weathered face in anxious gold. Blow the whistle? Or hold it? If the sound startled the bear into charging, the village would never forgive him. The bear advanced, closer now. His shadow stretched long against the library wall. His coat shimmered under the shifting glow, dark brown mixed with streaks of black, patches of lighter fur catching the faint moonlight. The sheer size of him dwarfed the doorway. The cub and its mother were gone now, hidden deep in the forest, their faint rustles swallowed by distance. The villagers knew what the bear had left behind, a choice. To follow her, or to confront them. A sudden metallic creak broke the silence. The boy's elbow had brushed against the window latch. The sound was soft, almost too small to notice. But the bear noticed. His head snapped toward the window. The villagers froze, breaths caught in their throats. His gaze was piercing, two dark orbs glowing faintly in the reflection of firelight. He lowered his snout, pressed close to the glass. The boy's breath caught, his tiny hand pressed flat against the pane, separated from the beast by only a thin layer of glass. The librarian lunged forward, yanking the boy back. Her breath came sharp and fast, her chest heaving with terror. The bear's wet nose smeared across the window as he exhaled, fogging the glass in return. Then, silence. His breath stopped. He drew back slightly, as though deciding. His massive head turned slowly, scanning the village. His ears twitched. Another sound, the creak of a shutter in the wind, the shuffle of boots across the square. The farmer lifted the whistle. This time he didn't hesitate. A piercing blast tore through the night, sharp and shrill, bouncing off the stone walls and soaring into the trees. The sound cut the silence in half. The bear jerked his head back, ears flattening. His body stiffened, claws scraping against the cobblestones as he shifted his weight. For one terrible heartbeat, everyone thought he would charge. But then, he stepped back. One heavy paw after another. He retreated a single step, his nostrils flaring again as if reassessing the threat. His massive chest rose and fell, breath visible in the cold night air. The boy, still pressed against the librarian's arm, whispered shakily, "Did it work?" The bear's head turned toward the forest again. He huffed once, deep and loud, then slowly lowered himself onto all fours. His massive frame looked even more ominous in the half-light, shoulders rolling with controlled power. But then, he began to move. Not forward, not toward the library, but sideways, following the edge of the village street. Lanterns flickered as he passed, his shadow sweeping over walls and doors like a storm cloud. The villagers leaned forward from their hiding places, eyes wide. He wasn't gone yet. He was circling. Watching. Testing. The librarian whispered, more to herself than to the boy, "He's not leaving." Not yet. The massive male didn't charge, but neither did he retreat fully. Instead, he stalked the edge of the village, his heavy body drifting toward the darker streets, leaving the villagers to wonder if he would vanish into the woods or return from the shadows. The bear's heavy frame disappeared momentarily into the shadows of the narrow street. Only the echo of his claws against the stones betrayed his presence. The villagers craned their necks, trying to follow his movement, but the shifting lantern light caught only fragments. A shadow brushing against a wall, the brief glint of fur. The librarian pressed her back against the library wall, her breath unsteady. She tightened her grip on the boy, who peered wide-eyed past her shoulder. "He's circling," she whispered. "He's testing us." Outside, the farmer lowered his whistle. His ears strained to follow the scrape of claws and the low, guttural huff that rolled through the stillness. The bear was close, but not visible. He had vanished into the dark pocket of the village, where only the thin silver of moonlight touched the edges of the rooftops. The tension in the air grew unbearable. Mothers inside the cottages pressed their children deeper under quilts, urging silence. The blacksmith's hammer, so often the loudest voice in the square, was absent now. Even the dogs, who had barked earlier, had retreated into their kennels, whimpering softly. And then, the sound shifted. The bear wasn't moving aimlessly. His steps carried him toward the rear of the library, where the narrow alley opened into a small garden. The air smelled different there, damp earth, crushed leaves, and faint sweetness. Apples. The villagers had stored crates of late-season apples in the shed behind the library. The boy gasped, realizing what the bear had caught. "The apples," he whispered. The librarian's eyes darted to the back window. Sure enough, the hulking shape emerged into view, lit faintly by the moon. His nose was high, twitching. His head turned, and then with deliberate power, he walked straight toward the shed. The sound of wood splintering shattered the silence. The bear shoved his weight against the door, and the frame groaned under the force. The villagers flinched with every crack. The farmer clenched his lantern tighter, his knuckles white. "If he gets inside," he murmured, not finishing the thought. Another slam. The door gave way, hinges tearing free with a sharp squeal. The bear's body pressed forward, filling the small structure with his bulk. Moments later came the sound of fruit rolling across the ground, the dull thump of apples spilling from crates. The boy's lips trembled, caught between fear and awe. "He's eating." And he was. The bear's jaws crunched through the soft fruit, each bite echoing unnaturally loud in the still night. Juice sprayed, dripping down his muzzle, glistening in the half-light. His breaths grew heavier, more rhythmic, less frantic. For now, hunger had replaced tension. But the villagers knew the risk. A bear feeding in the heart of the village was not safe. One wrong noise, one sudden movement, and the fragile line between hunger and rage would snap. The farmer stepped closer to the library, his boots scraping against the cobblestones. His eyes darted to the librarian through the window. "We can't let him stay. If he finishes, he'll keep coming back." The librarian's gaze hardened. She glanced at the boy, then back to the shadow of the massive bear devouring their stores. Her heart pounded as the crunching sounds filled her ears. Then came the moment that froze them all. The bear lifted his head. His muzzle glistened with juice, eyes dark and searching. He looked straight toward the library window again, though this time with a different intensity. He had tasted the apples, but something else pulled at him now. Curiosity hadn't faded, it had shifted. The boy, unable to resist, leaned forward again, his small hand pressing against the window pane. The bear's eyes locked on it. For a heartbeat, time held still. And then, the bear left the shed. Not in retreat, but in deliberate, heavy steps, walking back toward the library. Toward the boy's hand. The crunch of apples stopped. The bear now walked directly toward the library window, his breath heavy, his gaze locked not on the food, but on the child. The bear's paws landed heavily on the cobblestones, each step deliberate, dragging the weight of silence with him. His head lowered slightly, his breath pushing white puffs into the cold night air. The apples lay forgotten behind him, scattered in broken crates, juice soaking into the dirt. But his eyes weren't on the fruit anymore. They were fixed on the small hand pressed against the glass. The boy's breath fogged the window as he leaned forward, his eyes wide but unblinking. His palm stayed where it was, trembling only slightly. The librarian reached to pull him back, but her grip hesitated. Something in the child's stillness, in the way he held himself, froze her arm. The bear approached slowly, his massive frame illuminated now and again by the shifting glow of a lantern outside. His fur rippled in the half-light, coarse strands catching the silver of the moon. His steps echoed against the walls, a deep rhythm that made the villagers' hearts pound in unison. "He's coming closer," the farmer hissed, clutching the lantern so tightly that the iron handle burned into his skin. "We need to act." "No sudden moves," the librarian whispered sharply, her eyes locked on the bear. "If we frighten him now," she didn't finish. The bear reached the base of the library wall. His claws scraped faintly against the stone as he shifted his weight, tilting his head. His nose brushed the glass where the boy's palm rested. The sound was shockingly soft, a faint tap, followed by the fog of his breath blooming across the pane. The boy's chest rose quickly, but he didn't move. He whispered, barely audible, "He's not angry." The librarian's pulse thundered in her ears. She couldn't decide if it was madness or instinct that kept the boy frozen there. But the bear didn't growl. He didn't slam his weight into the wall. Instead, he pressed his muzzle gently against the window, as though testing the barrier between them. From outside, the villagers shifted nervously. One of the older men raised a pitchfork, but the farmer snapped at him in a low growl. "Put it down." "No." The air was too thin, too fragile for steel. Inside, the boy slowly lifted his other hand, placing both palms against the glass. The bear's breath misted the pain, each exhale deep and steady, each inhale pulling the boy's scent into his searching nose. For a long, unbearable moment, nothing moved but the drifting steam between them. Then the bear made a sound. Not a growl, not a roar, but a low, rumbling huff, almost like a sigh. His ears flicked back, and he shifted his weight again, pressing closer to the glass. The pane creaked faintly under the heat and moisture of his breath. The librarian finally found her voice. "Step back," she urged the boy, though even as she said it, her tone lacked conviction. Something in her chest told her this was no act of aggression. This was something else entirely, something she couldn't explain. The boy shook his head slightly, his eyes never leaving the bear's. "He's just looking." But the moment's quiet shattered with the sudden squeak of a loose cartwheel. Someone in the square had shifted nervously, pushing their cart too close against the stones. The sound rang sharp in the silence. The bear's head snapped toward it. His ears shot forward, body tensing like a coiled spring. His muscles rippled as his claws dug into the stone at the library's base. The villagers froze. The man with the pitchfork gripped it again, though his knuckles trembled. The boy gasped softly, pressing harder against the glass, whispering, "No, stay." For one breathless second, the bear seemed torn between the sound in the square and the presence at the window. His head swiveled back, his dark eyes meeting the child's once again. His body eased, not fully, but enough for the villagers to lower their weapons slightly. The librarian's knees felt weak, but her eyes widened with a new realization. The bear wasn't here to raid, not anymore. He wasn't hunting or even defending himself. He was seeking something else, something beyond hunger. Curiosity. Connection. The bear lowered his head again, pressing his muzzle flat against the glass. This time, the window rattled under the weight. The librarian instinctively grabbed the boy's shoulders, pulling him back a fraction, but he resisted. The boy whispered, louder now, "He wants inside." And the thought sent a shiver through every soul watching. The glass quivered under the bear's breath as he pressed harder, his massive frame looming in the moonlight. The boy's words echoed in the silence, "He wants inside." The glass groaned under the weight of the bear's muzzle. Each breath fogged the pain thicker, until the boy's face was hidden behind a veil of condensation. His palms stayed pressed against the window, as though the barrier between them was the only thread keeping the world from unraveling. The villagers stood frozen, their lanterns trembling in their hands. The square seemed to shrink around them, pulling every eye, every heartbeat, into that single moment at the window. "Any second now it'll break," someone whispered. The farmer swallowed hard, the iron handle of his lantern burning against his palm. He wanted to believe the boy's words, that this wasn't aggression, that the bear was only curious. But instinct screamed otherwise. If the glass gave way, if the bear pushed just a little harder, there would be no stopping him. The librarian's fingers dug into the boy's shoulders, torn between dragging him back to safety and letting him hold his ground. Her heart thudded in her chest like a drumbeat, every nerve screaming for her to act. The bear's massive paw lifted and rested gently against the stone below the window. His claws scraped faintly, a sound like steel against rock. The pane rattled. The boy tilted his head slightly, his breath fogging the glass from the inside. "He's not here to hurt us," he murmured again, voice steadier this time. But the villagers couldn't hear the boy's heart. They couldn't see the quiet in the bear's dark eyes, the strange softness hidden in the beast's immense frame. Then it happened. A faint crack split across the glass. The sound pierced the silence like a whip. The villagers gasped as one, several stumbling back, pitchforks raised. The librarian's grip tightened, dragging the boy away, but he resisted. "No," he cried, his voice sharp, desperate. "Don't scare him." The bear froze at the sound of the boy's shout. His ears flicked back, and for a long moment he didn't move. His muzzle stayed against the pane, breath rising and falling in deep, steady waves. The crack didn't spread further. The villagers' fear broke into whispers. "It's testing the wall," one said. "It's trying to get in." But the boy shook his head violently, pressing his forehead against the glass despite the librarian's grip. "He just wants to see." His voice cracked, raw and full of belief. The farmer's chest tightened. He'd seen bears raid crops, tear through wood, scatter livestock with the strength of storms. But this wasn't that. Something in the animal's patience, its restraint, gnawed at him. If the bear had wanted chaos, it would already have shattered the library apart. The bear's paw lowered back to the earth. Slowly, as if listening, it shifted its weight away from the wall. Its head tilted, eyes locking with the boy's through the haze. The low rumble in its chest wasn't a growl, more like the deep, resonant hum of recognition. The villagers remained tense, waiting for the explosion that never came. Every second stretched into eternity. Then the boy whispered one word. No one could hear it but the librarian, close enough to catch the faint sound. A single name. The bear's ears twitched, his breathing slowed, and the heaviness in the square shifted. He stepped back one pace, his massive shadow peeling away from the window. Relief broke through the villagers in uneven gasps, but none dared to lower their lanterns. The boy's eyes never left the glass. He breathed hard, fogging the window again and again, until the bear finally lifted his muzzle. The librarian's hand shook as she pulled the boy back a step, her voice trembling. "It's leaving," she whispered, though she didn't believe it. But the bear didn't turn away. Not yet. He lingered, still as stone, the muscles beneath his fur taut and waiting. His eyes swept the library interior one last time, as if committing it to memory. The farmer's heart thudded in his throat. He could see it, the bear deciding, wavering, on the knife's edge of action. One wrong move from anyone in the square and it would tip. A cartwheel creaked again. Someone gasped. The bear's head snapped toward the sound, shoulders tensing once more. And this time, he took a step forward. The bear stepped away from the wall, then turned sharply back toward the square, muscles coiled, eyes burning with intent. The villagers raised their lanterns in panic. The boy pressed harder against the glass and shouted, "Don't move." The bear's muscles rippled as he shifted his weight, every villager frozen in terror. The lantern light shook in trembling hands, their glow painting nervous faces and stretching shadows across the cobblestones. For one horrifying instant, it seemed certain the beast would surge forward, and the square would erupt into chaos. But then, the boy slammed his palms against the glass. "Wait." His voice cracked with desperation, yet it rang louder than the villagers' gasps. The bear stopped. His head swung back toward the window, toward the boy whose breath fogged the cracked pane. Their eyes met again, the wild and the innocent colliding across a thin barrier of glass and fear. The librarian's grip on the boy's shoulders tightened, but she didn't drag him back this time. Something in the bear's stillness kept her rooted, her instincts fighting the logic that screamed to run. The farmer lowered his pitchfork just slightly. His chest rose and fell with heavy breaths. "It's listening," he muttered, almost in disbelief. The bear's chest expanded with a deep inhale, nostrils flaring as if drawing in the memory of the moment, the scent of old books and human warmth drifting from the library. His paw shifted, claws glinting in lantern light, and then lowered back to the dirt with careful restraint. Slowly, almost reverently, the bear stepped backward. The tension in the air unraveled thread by thread. Villagers leaned closer, hardly daring to believe what they saw. The boy pressed his forehead to the cracked pane once more, whispering that single word again, the name only he seemed to know. His voice was barely audible, but it cut through the night. The bear's ears twitched. His gaze softened, if such a thing was possible in such a massive creature. Then, with a low, resonant rumble that seemed almost like acknowledgement, he turned. 1 step. 2. His shadow peeled away from the window and melted into the dark edge of the square. The villagers let out a collective breath, the silence breaking into ragged relief. A woman sobbed. A man dropped his lantern to the ground. The librarian sagged against the bookshelf, pulling the boy close against her side as her knees trembled. But the boy didn't look away. His eyes followed the bear as it retreated into the mist, its hulking form fading into the tree line. He lifted his hand slowly, pressing it flat to the glass, a silent farewell. No roar. No shattered glass. Just silence, as the night swallowed the bear whole. The villagers stared at the empty square, waiting for the creature to return, but the only sound was the faint rustle of leaves in the wind. The danger had passed. Yet for the boy, something remained. That unspoken exchange, a flicker of trust, a fragile bridge between two worlds that were never meant to meet. The librarian's voice broke the silence, soft but trembling. "It's over." But the boy shook his head, his small voice carrying more certainty than anyone expected. "No, he'll come back." The villagers murmured uneasily, shifting in their shoes. The farmer finally lowered his pitchfork completely, his voice rough but thoughtful. "If he does, maybe it won't be to harm." No one answered. The square slowly emptied, lanterns dimming one by one as the villagers dispersed into the night, leaving behind only the cracked window and the boy's lingering stare. Inside, the librarian smoothed the boy's hair and whispered, "You were brave tonight. But don't forget, he's still a wild creature." The boy nodded faintly, but his eyes never left the trees beyond the square. Deep down, he knew the librarian was right. Yet something told him this wasn't the end. And outside, in the forest where shadows pooled and the moonlight cut silver through the leaves, the bear paused. He looked back once toward the village lights, the distant glow of the library window, and the tiny figure who had stood unafraid. A low breath rumbled through his chest, neither growl nor roar, before he turned deeper into the wild. The bond had been made. In the days that followed, the cracked library window became a story whispered in the village, of fear, of wonder, of a moment when wildness met innocence. Some called it luck, others called it madness. But those who were there knew it was something else, a reminder that sometimes the fiercest creatures only want to see. What would you have done, standing at that window? Would you have pulled the child back, or trusted the silence in the bear's eyes? Like and subscribe for more true wilderness encounters, where the line between fear and trust is thinner than glass.